this becomes a bit easier because suddenly you're dividing the work amongst more than one person. So in this example, there were 3 of us, and each person wrote about 2 or 3 chapters, and that wasn't such a big effort as doing a book on your own, but at the end you've still got a product with your name on it. And so that is an alternative if you're someone who who likes being part of a team and has strong collaborators. There's also the possibility of being an editor of a volume to which you also contribute. Here's another book about the Marshall Islands that I edited with another guy called Frank Thomas some years ago. And we wrote chapters of this book, but the majority was not written by us. What we did was we edited chapters and corrected them and helped the authors. But it's still a book, it's still a book, it's still published, and it still has your name on it. But that's a different kind of job where you're writing some, but you're basically editing other people's work. So of course you need to make sure that the people who are contributing are people that you trust and that you feel can contribute. Here's another example of a book which was part of a series produced by the Geology Society of London. So similar to this one, but not on its own, part of a series. And these are just other examples of the same kind of thing. So to decide on which of these is for you, of course, you need to think about how much effort is involved, but you also need to think about you. Is it somewhere quiet? Is it somewhere that no one will disturb you? Is it somewhere that's peaceful, maybe has a nice view, a nice atmosphere? Or is it down at the cafe? I mean, some people find that they like to identify where is your place, because you'll be spending a lot of time there, right? You'll be spending a lot of time and you want to feel relaxed, inspired, soaking up the atmosphere while you're doing your work. So if you decide to go off to a temple in Vietnam or Bali, or build yourself a tree house or go to the National Library, well then, any of those or somewhere else. Writing a book involves lots and lots of different tasks. It's not just writing, okay? It's doing laboratory work. It's becoming an expert on some technique. It's doing field work and getting samples. It might be cleaning your boots. It might be shopping for equipment. It might be ordering samples or equipment. It might be drawing diagrams. It might be using a mathematical program of some kind. There are lots and lots of different tasks. It's not just one task of writing. There's all these other tasks that kind of underpin. And the thing is that it doesn't work, at least in my experience, to multitask all at once. You can't be thinking and writing and drawing diagrams and doing maths and doing field work and doing laboratory analysis all at the same time. It just doesn't work that way. So what you need to do is you need to prepare yourself for lots of different tasks. But what you do is you divide up your time. And so you say, right, this day or this period is going to be doing this period or day is going to be doing that, and you set yourself tasks. And you're probably thinking, what on earth are these pictures? Well, this is a TV program from when I was a young child in the UK, and the program was called Wurzel Gummidge. And this guy, Wurzel Gummidge, was supposed to be a scarecrow who would come to life. You know what a scarecrow is? It's one of those things you put in the field to scare away the birds so that they don't cut your corn or your crops in your field. Anyway, so this guy Wurzel Gummidge, his head was made out of a big vegetable. It was made out of a swede or a mangle wurzel, which is a kind of beet. And what he used to do was he had all these different heads, and he used to be able to take off his head and he could swap it for another head. And so if he was joining the choir and singing, then he had like he had a singing head that he could put on. or if on another day he was thinking, then he could put on this thinking head. Or if he had to do lots of reading or something, then he would like pull off his head and he would put on his reading head. And sometimes he would lose his different heads and he couldn't find them. So each of the different heads had a kind of particular skill that it was good at. Now, I don't know about you, but I can't take off my head and swap it for another head. But the point is that that Wurzel Gummidge, you know, had to basically prepare himself for whichever task it was that he was doing that day. And he couldn't do them all at once. He couldn't sing and read and think all at the same time, because it was just not possible, because only one head did one task. So the idea is that you just need to make sure that although you've got lots and lots of jobs to do, probably it's best not to do them all at the same time, is to divide them up according to the needs of your project at the time. How do you identify your niche? I mean, the reason you're writing a book or a thesis or a monograph is because you need to identify a gap in the research. And identifying that gap is only possible by reading. So a lot of time at the beginning is spent just reading. And in fact, this is probably the most enjoyable period of the research, because if you like reading, and you should like reading because that's why you're an academic, then you know you've got an opportunity here to do a lot of reading. And if you are already employed at a university or something, then you're being paid to read. So you should be passionate about your topic and your subject, and you know you will do a lot of reading. So you know, find your place and you identify your niche. You identify the gap that you are trying to fill or to plug by discovering the gaps in the research which exist from reading. And this was really, for me, probably the most enjoyable part. And by the end of this, you know, you're the expert. There is nobody in the world that knows more than you about this topic. So that is kind of a fulfilling idea, that you will become the leading expert in that particular topic by reading. Now, the thing is, of course, you've then accumulated all this knowledge, and on top of reading, you're going to be collecting your observations, you'll be collecting your data, you'll be turning these into results. So you have a kind of raw material, and you've got to turn that raw material into a kind of work of art. So here's a block of marble that's been turned into something beautiful. This, in fact, is the Venus de Milo statue, which is a famous statue. It's an ancient Greek statue, if I'm not mistaken, or maybe it's Roman, but I think it's Greek. And it's in the Louvre Museum, which is in Paris. So this photograph I've actually taken myself. I've been to see the Venus de Milo. But it started off life as a block of marble, right? So a sculptor, a sculptor, I mean, takes the raw material, which is a block of marble, and then is able to turn this into something fantastic, into a work of art. But the problem is that this doesn't really work with preparing a book. And it reminds me of an old joke. We have these things called elephant jokes in England. And there's one elephant joke that goes something like this. The joke says, what's the best way to make a sculpture of an elephant? And the answer is, well, it's easy. First, you take a large block of marble, and then you simply chip away everything which doesn't look like an elephant. And that's how you make a statue of an elephant, right? You take a block of marble and you just chip away everything which doesn't look like an elephant. Now the thing is that, of course, that's silly because it doesn't work, right? It doesn't work for a book. You can't just take all the notes you've made, a big pile of notes, or these days it's all on computers, so thousands of files and thousands of documents on your computer. But you can't take all of these and somehow kind of chip away at them and turn them into a PhD thesis. It doesn't work that way, right? It's a different kind of activity from making a statue. So the only way to really do this is to divide it up, and then you can conquer it in small pieces, right? You're not going to conquer your thesis all in one go. You're going to conquer it by dividing it up into little bits, chopping it into small pieces, and conquering each small piece one at a time. And this works wonderfully, because at the beginning, you know, the idea of a book or a thesis can be very depressing. Although you're interested in your topic and you're passionate about the subject, you've got to turn this huge, massive information that you've got in your head and on your table into a PhD. And it can be a very daunting task. It can be a task which is almost overwhelming. But if you divide it up into small bits, then it becomes much easier. So of course you're going to divide it up into introduction, into literature review, into methods, into observations, into results, into discussion, conclusion. And each little bit you divide into different sections, and each section you divide into different paragraphs, and each paragraph you divide into different sentences. So that is the way that you tackle a large project like this, because it's very different from writing papers. It's a much, much bigger thing. And you can't just take your block of marble and chip away and then hope it turns into a statue. It's not going to work. So instead you divide it into small sections and you conquer them one at a time. And then by doing that, you'll succeed at the end, because each little bit becomes something that you've achieved, and you can see the progress of achieving that work. Now, for me, I'm lucky, because when I was at school, our teachers made us write everything by hand. This is a photograph of me in my junior school. So I was 10 years old. I'm somewhere in the picture. Can you spot me? I don't know whether you can see me. I was only 10, so I was pretty young. This lady here was the headmistress. She was a nun. I went to a Catholic school, so she was Sister Francis, and this was my teacher, Sister Raymond. Anyway, I'm standing here. This is me there in the second row from the front, third from the left. So there I am. So our teachers used to set us homework in these red books. I can remember them. And at the time, it was awful, because at the end of school, the teacher would give back these books. We had one each. They were like exercise books, and I can remember them really well after all these years, right? And in the book would be the homework that the teacher had written. And sometimes it might be, I don't know, 5 maths sums to do, or it might be draw a picture of something. But once in a while, it would say, write an essay on the topic, or write a story on the topic of, and then it would give you a story. So whenever you were receiving your book before going home, your heart would always be beating, because you'd open it and you'd be saying, oh, please, no story, no story, please don't let it be a story. And you'd open it up, and if it was 2 or 3 sums, it was quite easy. But then, of course, once a week or once every 2 weeks, it would say, write a story. And you'd say, oh, no, you know, because it was a big job. Even though in those days, the story was maybe only 1 page long, but it seemed like a really big task at the time. But the idea was that the teachers made us write, right? We had to write in the book. And looking back, I can see the value of that, right? And I would suggest that anyone that is writing a book or a thesis or an edited volume should write by hand, practice and write by hand, because, you know, it develops your skills. Right, you can see the whole page, you can see what you've written, you can move things around, you can decide on a different order, and it becomes much easier to do that, rather than just typing straight onto a computer. don't, whatever you do, compose on the screen. Just look at the screen and think, right, I'll start writing. That is the worst way of doing it. Do it on paper. Write your notes on paper, write your drafts on paper, and then type them up. Because as you type them up, you'll then find that you're editing as you're going along. Even if your notes are quite rough, they will be refined and improved as you're typing them in. But if you just stare at the screen, hoping to write your book directly onto the screen, then all you're going to do is get eye strain, wrist problems, back problems, and give yourself all kinds of difficulties for the future. So my recommendation, my strong recommendation is do it on paper, right? And then type it up afterwards, and you'll find naturally that you'll be improving the English as you're typing it in, just like Kermit the Frog is doing in the picture there. The other advantage of writing by hand is that you can keep all your notes, you can keep all your drafts, and what happens is that you see them growing. And it's kind of a satisfying feeling seeing them accumulate and seeing them build up over time. Sometimes you'll even have to go back to some notes and think, oh, where are those notes? I need to find them. But if you've got just thousands of documents on a computer, then trying to sort through them is much more difficult, and you don't get the same sense of satisfaction because your computer always looks the same, right? You open your laptop and it looks the same every day, right? But if you've got a pile of notes that's growing, and these are your drafts, your first draft, your second draft, your third draft, your fourth draft, then you can see it growing, and you can get a feeling that you're actually accomplishing something and you're actually working towards the goal at the end. So I would recommend you keep all your drafts, fill your office with them, right? But if you do fill your office with them, just make sure that you keep them tidy. This is a professor from India. His name is Professor Singh, and I visited him at the University of Delhi about 3 years ago, before COVID. Seems a very, very long time ago. He keeps all his notes, but he doesn't keep them tidy. So this is his desk. This is his desk. Somehow he manages to work like that, right? If you ask him for something, he can find it. Bearing in mind exactly where it is on his desk. I don't know how he does it, some kind of magic trick. But you know, he keeps his materials, but I would keep them, but make sure they're at least organized in some kind of way that you can access in the future. So keep them organized. You will at some time face what you call writer's block, where you just can't move forward. You get stuck. And I've experienced this many times. In fact, I'm experiencing it right now, trying to write a paper about the Tonga tsunami and the Tonga volcanic eruption that occurred a month ago. I don't know whether you saw that on the news, but I'm trying to write a short piece with a few other people, and I'm struggling with it, right? This is a cartoon of the author of a famous book called Moby Dick. And Moby Dick was written by somebody called Herman Melville, but the cartoonist is called Gary Larson. I don't know whether you've ever heard of this cartoonist, but this is supposed to be the author trying to write the opening sentence of the book, right? So chapter 1, and he writes, "Call me Bill," and then he screws it up and he says, no, that's no good. "Call me Larry. Call me Al," and he's just got stuck at the first sentence and he can't get any further. He hasn't got very far and he's already stuck, right? And this is called writer's block. In fact, the real book, Moby Dick, it's been made into a movie as well. It's a film about a great white whale, and they go hunting this great white whale called Moby Dick. But the famous opening line, "Call me Ishmael," is actually not the opening of the book, it's the opening of chapter 3. but the cartoonist just pretended that it's the beginning of the book and that the writer is struggling with writer's block. So this will happen to you, right? This is going to happen at some point in your thesis or your book, and people feel like they want to give up, right? But what I do is you draw the diagrams, right? Draw the diagrams instead. You will have a lot of diagrams that you need to draw. And this is an important job, right? Important job, draw the diagrams, right? Draw the diagrams. What kind of diagrams do I mean? Well, there might be maps that you need for your book or your thesis. There might be tables of information or parameters or data. There might be models that have been done on computer somehow. This is a model of a freshwater lens on a small island. There will be graphs that you need to plot to make them look pretty. There will be photographs, in this case air photographs, but other kinds of photographs as well, where we've added scales and legends and text as well. There will be sketches, simple sketches or cartoons. There'll be charts like this as well. These are charts of cyclone occurrence in the Arabian Sea. And then there'll be diagrams as well. So if you're stuck, use the time to draw diagrams. I find this extremely therapeutic, right? Just spending a few hours drawing a diagram on a computer or drawing the table or the map. And it's very important. Don't just take them from the internet, right? Don't just cut and paste them. That looks awful, because if you're making so much effort with what you're writing, then why do you make no effort with your illustrations and just take them from somebody else? Don't do that. Draw your own diagrams, draw your own maps. All these have been produced either by me or by people that I've worked with. And you need to have your own illustrations. Your own illustrations is just as important as your own written work. And sometimes the illustration can really help writer's block, because you draw a diagram and then you've got something to say about that diagram. You can write 2 or 3 sentences or 2 or 3 paragraphs about the image, about the diagram, explaining what it shows. And that can help get you out of your writer's block. So use the time. Don't just go down the cafe. Don't just give up and don't do anything. You can do something constructive, because at the end of the day, even if you've not written something but you've drawn a diagram, well, that's another job done. It's another task which is done, and it's going to look good, and it's going to decorate your book, and it's also going to convey information as well. Don't forget, diagrams are important because they convey information in a different way from what you write. A different part of your brain uses or accesses illustration to make sense of them. So they're very, very important. Here are 2 dishes that I like to eat. One is beef rendang, which is a kind of Indonesian style curry. Apologies if you don't eat beef. I think most people in Vietnam do eat beef, but if you don't, then sorry for putting this up here. But beef rendang, right, is something that I like to cook. I also like beef chow mein. What's the difference between the two besides the taste? Well, when I cook beef rendang, it takes me 10 hours to cook it. I prepare all the ingredients. That takes about 1 hour, and then it takes about 10 hours of cooking, because you put litres of coconut milk in the big pot, and then you cook it until it gets smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller, and you end up with a masterpiece, which is beef rendang. And if you ever come to visit Dubai, Kim Ann, tell me in advance and I'll cook some beef rendang. And it takes a whole day to do it, right? Beef chow mein is also tasty, but it's fast food. It takes 3 minutes. You put it in the wok, you cook it up, and it doesn't take very long. So your thesis, your book, right? Take your time, right? Is it fine dining or is it fast food, right? Have you seen the movie Ratatouille? where the rat is actually doing the cooking. Have you seen this movie? Where it's a Disney movie. It's quite good. It's supposed to be in Paris, and this guy here is a chef, but he doesn't know how to cook. But there's a rat who is a cordon bleu chef, and he puts the rat under his hat, and the rat does all the cooking, right? And he does all this amazing food. Whereas SpongeBob, do you know SpongeBob? SpongeBob SquarePants. Have you seen this cartoon? You can nod if you've seen him. He's the cook at a little fast food restaurant, and he makes burgers, and he makes hundreds of burgers at once. So he's a fast food chef. So you need to see yourself as a cordon bleu chef, right? Who takes time over what you do. You don't need to rush and do it quickly, right? You need to spend time. Otherwise, the product will be fast food instead of fine dining, and you want your book or your thesis to be something extravagant and fantastic, not something that we've all seen before and is not really very impressive. In Portugal, there's a university that I spent some time at called Coimbra, Universidade de Coimbra in Portugal. And it's a very famous university. It's a very old university. It's the 4th or the 5th oldest university in the world. I think it dates back from 1290. So it's a very, very old university. And the students wear these uniforms, right? They wear these black uniforms with white shirts, and they wear these capes. And some students apparently have spent their whole life at university. Right, they don't want to finish. They just stay there forever. There's a term for it. They call it professional student. I don't know how they get their money, but they just stay at university for years and years and years. And each year that you stay, you get your friend to tear a rip in your cape. So the students who are new don't have any rips, but the students who have been at the university for many years, their capes are full of all these rips, and some of them are shredded into pieces, and you can hardly recognise the capes anymore. Apparently, some businesses or some professions like it in Portugal if the students have spent many years at university, because they think, for example, if you're going to be an engineer, if you've failed a few times, you've done the course again and again and again, and when you eventually pass, you've done the course 5 or 6 times, which the engineer profession thinks is better than just doing the course once. So even though you failed it a few times, you've actually accumulated more knowledge overall. So the idea here is that the students take their time to finish their program. And the idea is that you need to take your time as well. I'm not suggesting that you remain a student at the University of National Central University for 20 years, but you don't need to rush it. You should take your time until it's done, right? Until it's done. What's this picture here? Well, the students go down once a year and they go and fight against bulls. They do bullfighting. So these are students doing bullfighting down in the city of Figueira de Foz. They don't actually kill the bull, they just have fun with the bull, but these are students from the same university. So take your time, right? Take your time. It's going to be a long time, but don't feel that you need to hurry up and finish it, because you'll end up not doing a good job. You'll end up with fast food, not fine dining. Ask for help from people, right? Ask for feedback. I asked for feedback from my book, my cyclones book, from this guy called Cliff Ollier. He's a volcano expert. He's now 90 years old. He's still alive. He just had his 90th birthday a couple of months ago. But when I was writing my book in 2005 and 2006, I asked him to give me feedback. So I gave him some chapters and he read through them and he gave me lots of feedback. So this is the feedback that he wrote to me by email. Of course, you might even get more detailed feedback. You might have people that are willing to actually look at the English and correct it like that. But, you know, there are people around you who are your friends, your colleagues, they are experts as well. Ask them, what do you think? What's missing? What could be better? What's too long? What's too short? What needs improving? You know, what questions are still in your mind after you've read that chapter that I haven't answered, that should be answered? So it's not just about the English, it's about the whole scope and content. They can really see, sometimes you're so immersed in your project that you can't take a step back, but somebody else is taking a good step back, and they can give you some really valuable feedback. So make sure you ask for help. Don't feel that you are on your own, right? That you're on your own. If you're writing a book, at the end, you have got a manuscript, and you then got to think about where it's going to be published. And there is a danger that you'll make a big mistake and spoil all the work, because you need to choose a publisher, and there are lots and lots and lots of publishers nowadays that want to get their hands on your work because they know they can make money from it, right? But many of these publishers are what we call predatory publishers. Maybe you're already experiencing this, where you receive messages. I get them every single day asking me to contribute articles to journals which don't really exist. They do exist, but they're what you call junk journals. They're predatory. And basically, if you publish with one of these publishers, then you'll spoil your reputation. Now, some academics are so desperate to publish that they'll use these publishers because they promise to publish quickly. And what you do is you pay them. They don't pay you. You pay them to publish your work. And what they do is they promise that there's going to be distribution, that there's going to be sales, that they have an online platform, and that your work will immediately be a big success and a big hit. Well, you know, take a step back, think and check whether or not these publishers are good publishers or not. I would stick with the main publishing houses. Like the main publishing houses will, like Springer, Wiley, Blackwell's, Elsevier, Sage. All of these are well-known publishers, and normally they will they'll help you. You know, the editors can help with explaining, you know, what the book length should be, you know, how many diagrams are allowed, whether you can have color or not color, whether there's going to be an e-book version or a hard copy of the version. All these kinds of things you need to discuss. But many scientists, especially in developing countries, can be tricked into using predatory publishers. And once you've done that, you can't publish your work again with another publisher because it's already been published. So just make sure you know who this publisher is, and don't listen to any of their promises. You know, ask for advice from your colleagues as well. Otherwise, they're going to be laughing, they're going to be making all the money, and you're going to end up having a reputation as somebody who is publishing what potentially could be bad science with a bad publisher. So watch out for that. And then, you know, believe it or not, you will come to the end, right? You'll be surprised. If you chip away little bits at a time, if you divide and conquer, if you draw your diagrams and keep your drafts, then the time goes by. And, you know, one day you're writing the beginning, as Snoopy is here. It was a dark and stormy night, beginning of his book. And the next thing you'll know, you'll be at the end. It will be finished. And you'll think, wow, it's finished. It can't be finished. How can it be finished? But that day will come. So don't despair. You know, think, oh well, that day will never come. It will eventually come. And once it does, then make sure that you enjoy being a superstar for a little while. You know, you've done a lot of work. You've probably been separated from your friends and your family for more time than you should have done. So, you know, enjoy the stardom while it lasts. Or, you know, it might be that you are completing a PhD thesis. So, you know, enjoy that moment. You know, you deserve it at the end. Or maybe you're writing your book so that you can be promoted from associate professor to professor, or from assistant professor to associate professor, so you can enjoy that as well. But the day will come, it will be completed finally, and you'll look back and you'll say, oh God, you know, I can't believe that it's actually over, but you'll be finished. Anyway, I think that's the last slide. So those are just a few reflections on a brief survival guide to writing a book or a thesis. And thank you very much for listening. I'm really glad that you're here this afternoon, and I'd be more than happy to answer any questions that you might have. Thank you very much. I'll pass back to the chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Terry, for the introductory talk. I like your presentation. You use so many very easy, funny picture to explain to us. So now it is the time for the question. I would like to invite Assistant Professor Dung to be a chair of the section. If anyone has a question,
hello, Chair. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
I'm not sure that I turn on the microphone. As Dr. Kim only have an introduction from the beginning, but really quick that my name is Daisy. So far, I'm working in the National Tong University of Science and Technology. That's one kind of the university in the south of Taiwan. And I am also the council member of the Vietnamese Experts Association in Taiwan. And I would like to thank you for giving a talk and for taking time and give us a talk today. And probably I have been writing any book, but it seems like I feel that it's really useful information that you are sharing for us how to write a book. And maybe it's just way for others audience because this is quite, I think it's most of the audience may students, so it's writing a book is quite really far with us or with some of our audience. So maybe I try, even I haven't write any book, but maybe I come up with some really general question. It's like, because I'm thinking about how to write a book. So do you think that should I select a topic? Is my expert on it, or just the topic that I'm interested in? So
That's a really good question, Daisy. You said your name was Daisy, is that correct?
Yes.
Yeah, right, Daisy. That's a coincidence, because that's my wife's name as well. So that's a coincidence, isn't it? But anyway, Daisy, nice to meet you. And of course, everything that I've said is also for a PhD thesis as well. It's the same process. It's exactly the same thing for a PhD thesis as it is for writing a book. Because in a way, a PhD thesis is a book. You know, it's a single, very big monograph. But yeah, you've got to choose a topic that you are passionate about, that you're more than interested, that you just love the topic. The reason is that you're going to be focusing on this exclusively for a long time. And if you choose a topic just because you think it's important but not really interested, then after 6 months or 10 months or 18 months, you're going to lose your motivation. It's got to be something that you just can't get enough. You want to read more and more and more, and that will be your inspiration. So, you will become an expert through the process of writing that thesis or writing that book. You don't have to be an expert now. I mean, you might already be partly an expert, learning more might be one of your areas of expertise. But then the process of producing the thesis or the book turns you into the expert. So you don't have to be the expert first, but you just have to make sure that you have more than an interest, more than a passion, so that you can sustain yourself, because you're going to be living and breathing this topic for 2 years or 3 years. And what you don't want to do is to get bored halfway through and then give up because you're tired of the subject.
Thank you, James. The reason why I asked this question because when I try to write a review article, but that is not my expert on. So I face with a lot of challenge when a lot of reviewers asking us how many publications that I have done in that topic. But yeah, I think it takes a lot of challenge when I try to switch in the one that I'm interested in. So yeah, but you are right. If I try to write in something that I'm not interested in, so I feel that it's not don't have any motivate to keep writing. So
that's absolutely true. Yeah, you'll lose motivation. Yeah. There's been a couple of questions, I think, through the chat. So I've gone back to this slide here, and somebody's asked about words like however and therefore. Well, you just don't need to use them, Hang Long. You just need to just don't put them in. So you can keep them in your sentences, but don't just have them every single sentence. People overuse them. However, therefore. You just don't. Sometimes you can just leave them out. But there are other alternatives as well. You can use things like thus, and say yet. So these are other kind of alternatives that you can use instead. And then somebody else, May was asking about handwriting. Well, the point here is not so much the style. It's just that it's everyone has their own way of doing this, May. But what I do is I kind of start with a blank sheet of paper, and I just have the headings of the sections. And then within the sections, I kind of write down the main points, but not in sentences. So I write down, one point, another point that I want to use in that paragraph. And then I say, right, what order should they be in? So I draw lines, and I say this should be here and that should be there. This needs a diagram, so I put a little mark to show that the diagram is needed. So you're not just taking a piece of paper and away you go. You're taking a piece of paper and you're organising the structure first, and you're breaking it down. So you might decide on one day that all you want to do is just to achieve one paragraph about one particular thing that you're writing about. And so you say, right, what goes in this paragraph? Right, put a little heading, and then you have your 5 or 6 bullet points, and then you write them down, and then you decide if that's everything, or if there's more, or if anything can be removed. Let me show you. So here's one that I was doing this morning, right? So this is just a little bit of work. I'm trying to write a paragraph about tsunami generation. Tsunami generation of the tsunami that occurred in Tonga. So I've got, A, B, C, D. I've got a few scribbled notes about, the 5 sentences or the 5 things that I need to talk about. And then I will try to write sentences for each one of those. And I cross them out, and I write other words, and I prepare a draft on here. So it doesn't have to be perfect on here, it just has to be the draft. And then when I'm happy that I've got enough, then I transfer this by typing on the computer. And I find that in my mind, I'm improving it while I'm typing. So I don't need to write it out 10 times on paper until it's perfect. I've written down my rough sentences. But this way, you know, I can see this comes before that. I might decide, oh, this one should come before that. I can draw a line, draw an arrow, and I can see everything at once on the page. But you can't do that on the computer. You can't see everything at once. So it's much more difficult because you write something, it disappears off the top of the screen and you can't see it again as you go downwards. But looking at this, even if I filled it up, I can see the whole thing at once. And I can move it around, mix it up, change the structure, change the order, add new subheadings, add new diagrams where I want them. So that is why I do it on paper. And it's satisfying seeing this build up. It's satisfying seeing them grow into something which I know is coming towards a thesis. Anyway, thanks for the question.
We got the question from the email. The question is, what are the difference between for the master degree and the PhD degree for the writing research thesis?
Well, that's a good question, but I think it's probably very similar, except that the master's thesis is just not so long. It's a shorter exercise. So the process is the same, except normally the time is less and the length of the thesis is less. But I would still approach it in exactly the same way, you know, as writing something longer as well, because it's basically a big piece of work, isn't it? It's a big, it's probably the biggest thing that you've ever had to write one go. So it's the same kind of challenge. PhD thesis, you just have to have a bit more energy because you've got to keep going. It's like running a marathon race. You've got to keep going for 3 years or 4 years instead of for 2 years. So it's a 2-year marathon compared to a 4-year marathon. You need a bit more energy.
More energy, yeah. And one participant they asked how to write the discussion. I think the most difficult part
Yeah, the discussion. Yeah, the discussion is probably the most interesting, but also the most difficult, but also the most rewarding chapter. Why is that? Well, because up to that point, you're just doing a report, right? You're doing a summary of other people's work in the literature review. You know, in the literature review, you are summarising what's been done already. So you're taking all your readings that you've done and you're summarising what do we know about the topic and what do we not know about the topic. That's how you identify your gaps, right? Then you do your analysis, right? Your lab analysis, your field analysis, your computer model analysis, whatever it might be, to produce your data. And that's like the production of the science, production of new data that doesn't exist already. That is your contribution, it's the production of new data that doesn't exist. And that is all fantastic, right? But if you stop there, that's the same job that a lab technician might do, just producing the results. The discussion chapter is the chapter where you have to answer the question, so what does it all mean? Right? That is the question which is at the top of the discussion chapter. What does it mean? What does it mean? What does it all mean? And in other words, you're trying to interpret the information. Now there might be 10 different interpretations, and there might be one which is the most obvious or the most likely. There might be a second option which is possible. Then there might be a bunch of other ones that are possible as well. And what you've got to do in your discussion, you've got to cover all the possibilities and don't leave the reader guessing, thinking that you've missed one out, you've forgotten one. So you've got to make sense of the information. You've got to explain it to the reader and answer the question, what does it all mean? And it's a difficult right? But one technique to help is to compare yours with other people. So what did I find? Is it the same as what that person found, or is it different from what that person found? How much similarity is there, or how much difference? And that's one way to help you with discussion and making some comparisons. So, for example, there was a cyclone, a tropical cyclone that affected Oman, or the Gulf of Oman, just in October last year. And you know, in the discussion, you've got to try to make sense of why it's like that. Here we are. Look, here's the cyclone that came to the Gulf of Oman. So in the discussion of this work, I've got to explain, you know, why did it do that? Why is it different? What's unique? What's special? How does it compare with other cyclones? And that's what the discussion is all about. So it's a very, very rewarding chapter because you're trying to make sense of your data, your information, which is new information that nobody else has. It's not easy, but the trick is to compare with what other people have done already and to see if your work is different or the same.
Thank you, James. I think we have a few more questions in the chat, but you have to go outside to them, right, James? Do you have time to answer some more questions, or we should close now?
I do, yeah. I've got a class. I've got a class at 5:30 your time, but it's a short distance away, so I need to leave by 15 minutes past. So there's still time. Steps to the results chapter. Somebody asked about that. Results. Well, the results is interesting because it's your information you've produced, and the results. There are different kinds of results. First of all, there are the observations. The observations are what you see, what you observe. That's what observe means. It means to see. So, you know, so if you're doing a lab experiment, what did you see? If you've gone to some place in the field to go and collect some samples, what did you see there? What was it like? In this example of the cyclone, you know, what do we see? You know, how big is it? How small is it? Where did it go? Right? So these are the observations, and then you've got the results, and the results are different because they are the numerical data, the numbers that you've collected. You know, through doing some laboratory analysis, by doing some computer modeling, by doing some questionnaire survey, or whatever method you've used, you've got some numerical results as well. So you've got observations and you've got your numerical results. And then you've got the analysis, and the analysis means any kinds of mathematics or statistics or way that you've analysed the results. And that can also include diagrams, or that can include maps or anything like that. So, you know, so here is information, here are results on the amount of sediment in a stream during a cyclone event. Now, I could just have the results in the text and say, well, first there was not much sediment, and then the sediment increased, and then it went to a maximum, and then the water went clear again. But that's not very interesting. So the analysis means plotting the results as a graph, and I can see that the graph is showing a loop, which means that as the water got deeper, the amount of sediment was more. The water got dirty, and then through time it gradually got clean. So this is the analysis. So observations, then the numerical data, and then the analysis and the presentation of that analysis, which might be graphs or charts or diagrams or tables or anything like that. The results chapter should be full of visualization, should be full of visualization to keep life interesting, because visualization is another way of showing the results in addition to what you're writing in sentences. So I would expect the results section to be full of images, illustrations. If it isn't, then you're missing the chance to convey the information in a much more user-friendly way, a much more exciting and colourful way as well. So those are my principles. Separate observations from the numerical data, prepare some analysis, and then visualise the results as much as possible so that they can be clear to the person who is looking at them. Those are my principles for the results. Someone's got a question about dividing the tasks and the steps when writing the thesis. That was from Han Tan. Well, the first division, of course, is simply the division into the chapters. That's the first division, right? The division is just what goes into what section. And that should be quite straightforward. Your supervisor should be helping you with that, right? So the first big step is to say, well, what goes in the introduction, what goes in the literature review, what goes in the methods, what goes in the results and the analysis. So that is the big overarching division. So you can divide and conquer this huge mass of information. You can sort it out into bits which are much more manageable. It's a bit like eating a loaf of bread, right? People in Vietnam like bread, or very good at making bread in Vietnam. But, you know, if you buy a big loaf of bread, you don't eat the whole thing at once. It's not possible. You have to eat it at a time. Otherwise, you're going to give yourself indigestion. So you need to take something big and chop it into small slices, and then decide what goes into which slice. That's how you do it. And then, of course, each chapter you then divide into your headings and your subheadings. So divide it into many subheadings. And each heading might just be 5 sentences. But if you have a subheading, you write those 5 sentences on that day, you can go home satisfied that you've achieved a small step towards your thesis, rather than saying, oh, I need to write that chapter, some big chapter that's just overwhelming. Don't do that. Chop it up into small pieces. Take each piece at a time. Does that make sense? Are you happy with that?
Yes.
Thank you, James. So I heard that you have to leave in around 5 to 10 minutes later, right?
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah. So I see on the participant, our audience, it has Annie. Miss Young. I saw that she also writing some books. So would you like to come up with some questions?
No, I think there is another question: how to avoid the self-evaluation as writing the thesis?
I didn't see that one. How to avoid the what? Sorry, I didn't see that question.
Oh, the question on the job.
Yes, of the Liao.
Oh, right.
Here should be the last question, and then we can close because Professor James had class.
Yeah. So what's the question? Annie says that her PC can't use the mic, but I didn't catch what the question was.
The question was how to avoid the self-evaluation at the writing the thesis.
Oh yes, right. I can see it now. Yeah. when you say self-plagiarism, do you mean referring to your own papers that you've already published? So if you've already published papers and you haven't yet finished your thesis, well then congratulations, that's really something amazing. You've already got publications out that you've produced before even finishing. I know some supervisors these days expect you to write some papers even before you finish. When I did my PhD, that wasn't the case. I wrote the papers afterwards, near the end. So congratulations to you. And I would say that you don't need to avoid self-plagiarism. I think that if you've already produced the results and you've published them, then it means that they are out there. And your work, your thesis, is based on those same results. So I think you need to refer to those papers, those publications. Probably you don't have that many. And if you tell me you've already got 20 papers for your PhD thesis, I'm surprised. So if you've got 3 or 4, then that's no problem. I think what you're probably referring to is maybe with a book. With a book, it's very tempting to refer to every single paper that you've ever written. Now, Kim Ann seems to be writing one paper every 2 weeks and publishing it. She's so lucky. So she's got hundreds of publications, and if she wrote a book, it would be tempting for her to then include all of them. And of course, what you don't want to do is just kind of show off and say, oh, look how many publications I've got on my reference list. So absolutely, have a few, but just have a balance. So I would say that you don't want to have more in a reference list in your book. You don't want to have more than about 5% of the papers reference your papers. So 95% or 90% should be other workers. 50% of the references are from your own work and 50% from other people, then that's not a good balance. So have your own, absolutely fine, but don't kind of show off and say, look how many I've got. Just keep it to a minimum, and in the reference list, 5%. So if you have 100 references, then maybe 5 of your own would be the maximum. If you have 20 references, then maybe 1 or maybe 2 at the most would be kind of appropriate. But good question. Thank you for that.
Thank you, Professor Zentarian, for sharing us how to write a book, how to write a good thesis. And thank you, participants. Thank you, Professor Dung, for the sharing discussion session. So we would like to close this webinar today, and I would like to see Professor Zentarian again in Taiwan or Vietnam. And hope we can have your second time as the sharing experience in the next year available time. It's okay?
Well, thank you for inviting me. I was really happy to do this. Thank you for the questions. I hope that you found this a little bit useful. I know the experience is different from everybody, but it's enjoyable, and you'll be doing it at some point. I hope to have contact with some of you. I know Kim Ann very well, for Daisy and all the others. Please don't be shy to stay in touch. I would love to come back to Vietnam and to Taiwan, of course, to do more research on coasts or typhoons or tsunamis or anything to do with rivers or geomorphology. So if anyone has an interest in those kinds of things, then it'll be lovely to stay in touch. So thank you, Kim Ann, for organising, and thank you all for giving up your time and listening.
Thank you, Zin.
Thank you, James.
Thank you, everyone. Yes. See you next time.
See you next time.
Bye.
See you again. Have a good day.
Bye.
Bye.
Yes,
Bye.
have a good day. Oh, Zentarian, do you see anyone here?
I can see somebody behind you. Yes, Luian. Hello, how are you?
Hello, just come to say hi to you.
Yeah, long time no see. You too.
Yeah, hi to you too. Hi to you as well. Hopefully we can see each other in December. That would be really nice.
Yes, look forward to welcome you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Talk
As long
to
as,
Yes.
as long as Taiwan can remove the quarantine, then that means that things can go back to normal, I hope.
Yeah, the quarantine time is shortened to 10 days soon.
Right, 10 days.
Still lonely.
Yeah, 10 days quarantine for a 2-day meeting is quite long.
Yeah.
Not effective.
So that's great. When the situation is getting better.
Yes, yeah, situation is getting better. Good. But nice to see you both.
Yeah.
And I've got to go to class, so we'll stay in touch. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye bye. Yeah, thank everyone. See you next time. Bye bye.
Bye bye.